Joel here from the Board Game Mechanics. Today in my cardboard corner I'm looking at Flashpoint Fire Rescue with a special emphasis on the Tragic Events expansion. It's my understanding the Tragic Events expansion was a Kickstarter that fulfilled, and now it's going to be coming to retail soon. Maybe now, maybe it's already out, depending on when you're seeing this video. So let's get into it. I'm going to give you a basic of the base game, like gameplay, real brief, and then I'm going to go ahead and get into the Tragic Events expansion with more depth. I actually do say this in my gameplay part here that I'm going to do it in 5 minutes. I'm going to explain the base game in 5 minutes, and I do. There's a little timer there. If you don't want to hear anything about the base game, you can scrub ahead and get past it, skip those 5 minutes. If you don't know much about Flashpoint, maybe you want to watch that to get a base understanding of the expansion. So without any more explanation of what I'm going to do anyway, let's get right to it. This video is going to be an overview of the game, Flashpoint, not a rules explanation, because I don't have time to do a full rules explanation for Flashpoint and then get into Tragic Events, which I really want to focus on Tragic Events in this. So I'm going to give you a very just brief overview of this game. If you know how to play it, you could probably fast forward the next, let's go with 5 minutes. I'm going to try and keep my explanation to 5 minutes, and then we'll get into Tragic Events 5 minutes from this point in the video. So I'm going to keep an eye on time, 5 minutes from right now. Right off the bat, let's go through the components of this game. You get firefighters of different colors. You get these AP markers, which are going to be used. You could use them a couple ways. You could use them for saving your AP and just using them for that. Or you could take the AP and spend them to keep track of if you've done 4 actions or not. These are your base fire tokens. Your base fire tokens have smoke on one side and fire on the other, which shows the progression of fire through the building. You have these smaller little flame things called hotspots, and those hotspots are basically going to be a way that we're going to show that the building is getting more and more flammable as we go on, and it's going to make the fire advance more easily as we get more of those on the board. We have these vehicles. We have the fire truck, which basically lets us do a explosion of water into the building, and then we have the ambulances, which are basically where our firefighters are going to need to go if they get knocked down in the firefighting process, and it's also where we want to deliver our potential victims. We have a bunch of points of interest in this game that go on the board face down. When you flip them over, they have either a person or a blank side. There are a couple pets in there. These black cubes indicate the structural integrity of the house. As we deplete the supply of these cubes, as we're chopping through walls or as the explosions in the house start to break down walls more, we will end up with the house becoming less stable, and we will end up not being able to go back in. It's too dangerous to save people if the building is too far gone. So that's like almost a time or two that as the building starts to deteriorate, we can't keep going in. We also have hazmats. Hazmats, if they become on fire, are highly flammable and will create explosions. And we have some of these tokens here that indicate that someone has been healed. So that's one of the player powers, is that you can heal a person so they can walk out on their own accord if you lead them. So it's not quite as expensive to try and get them out of the building. What happens is we place fire in the building based on the setup rules. The family game has kind of a more predetermined places for the fire to go. The advanced rules, you rule things on to have the fire show up. We also put down points of interest. The points of interest are limited to being in spaces that don't have a threat in them, either smoke or fire. Can't have a firefighter in them, and can't have another point of interest. And that's why they have these little arrows on the board that say, hey, if you rolled another person in this spot, slide them over one spot. On our turn, once we have the fire set up in the game, we're basically trying to get these people out, identify which ones are people and which ones are false alarms, and then get them out of the building. The game basically has roughly 2 phases. There's one where we use our action points. Our action points are basically going to be used for walking and moving through the building and putting out fire and identifying and pulling out victims from the building. And then we also have a character that's variable with some special powers in there. Some people are better at using the truck to put out the fire, using the deck gun on the truck. Some are wise firefighters that are able to move other people to more useful places on their turn, not the other player's turn. Some people are able to move through the building very quickly and chop through walls very quickly. Others are dedicated to just putting out fire. So you have your team that has special powers, and on your turn, you're moving and putting out fire and trying your best to get these people out of the game. out of the building before they are encapsulated with fire. We're also going to roll these 2 die and use a grid system where the red die is going to represent the rows and the black die will represent the columns for where fire goes. The way how the progression of fire happens is we go from smoke. If there's nothing there, we put down smoke. If smoke's already present, then we go to fire. If fire is already present and we roll those coordinates, then that would make an explosion of fire. And that means that in all 4 directions, orthogonally out from this fire, something's going to happen. There'll be one of 3 possible outcomes. Either the fire will spread and put fire into other locations, or it will knock doors off of their hinges and make the doors go away. Or if it hit walls that are not doored walls, then it would put one of these damage cubes on the wall, showing that there was damage to the structure of the building. Fire can actually go outside through open doors. So even though we sometimes will get the potential victims outside, it's important to get them in the ambulance because they still could become engulfed in fire. Once a potential victim is engulfed in fire, as this person is, they are lost and we are not able to save that person. So they go out of the game as someone who is not able to be saved. Another thing that happens in this game is initially when we started the game off, I talked about hotspots. Hotspots are basically things that cause flare-ups in the game. And as you hit hotspots, more hotspots come onto the board. It serves as a timer to show that the building is becoming more flammable, but they make you make additional rolls of advancing fire. You keep doing this until you save the right number of people. The building either becomes so unstable you can't go in and save people, or enough people have passed away or been lost to the fire that we can no longer win. So the only way to win is save enough people. There are a couple ways to lose. That's an overview of how you play Flashpoint. So I hope that that gives you just some kind of clue about the overall gameplay. I would suggest that you go find a video with more rules in it if you really want to know about the base game, because now I'm going to really focus on the Tragic Events expansion, which is the newer thing to this game. So the Tragic Events expansion comes with the following components. The event deck, we'll talk more about that here in a second. A fire deck, and some specialists that aren't included in the base game. It also includes these different sculpts of different firefighters that are unique to match up with their card. This has been available in other Kickstarter editions of this game and more deluxe versions of it. You wouldn't have to use these if you only had the base game. There are also a set of victims in there that some of them have special things that are going on with them. What happens in this game now, instead of us just picking out, just rolling die, we're going to take something from the fire deck. And the fire deck basically has 3 kinds of cards in it. It has the Fire Rages cards, which mean that we simply advance the fire like we did in the base game. We also, because of this, the way how this deck works, and accelerates the fire, we don't have to play with hotspots anymore. So hotspots used to be in this game the worst part of this game to explain to new players, and it was something that was often overseen. The rules for putting more on were sometimes confused, and then they just were forgotten. And we would get games that weren't played as well because of that. So getting rid of the hotspots, we're going to talk about that in my final thoughts, but that's a positive thing, I think. Accelerate the fire. So when we accelerate the fire, we're adding one of these flare-up cards. So these all have directions on them on what we do. Fire Rages, we just advance the fire. Accelerate, we advance the fire again, and then we add a flare-up card into our discard pile. Then we draw and resolve an event card, which we'll get to those in a second, and we shuffle the fire deck discard pile and the draw pile together so that we have that brand new flare-up card that went into the deck show up in the base of fire cards that we're going to be drawing from. So it's a little bit easier, I think, than hotspots, and I think it's a little more interesting. So let's go ahead and take a look now at some of the event cards that can happen. So the event cards can happen in a couple ways. Some of the cards will say heroic. If you draw a heroic card, you follow the rules for that. Some cards say ignore this card, draw a new card. This one just has 2 layers. It has the advance the fire, and it has the advance the fire twice because it's the heroic level. This one says fortuitous escape. This one just basically is going to let you take 2 damage markers off of the supply board. So you're kind of like advancing that timer a little bit, but then you get to remove a flare-up card from the deck. So that deck that might be getting more and more difficult, that might be a card that you'd want to use because you're trying to get one of those flare-up cards out of there. The Broken Hydrant, and this is nowhere near all the cards. These are just some of the ones that I thought were interesting that we're going to go over right now. The Broken Hydrant doesn't let you use the deck gun anymore. A Rally of Desperation for each lost victim, so everyone who's passed away, you get a little bit of an adrenaline rush and gain 1 saved action. Burst Water Pipe is like a free deck gun, so sometimes things happen that are positive for you. So a pipe bursting would splash a bunch of water on the fire and help us out as firefighters. Horde of Cleaning Supplies. Add 2 new hazmats into the game. Yuck. Do I hear footsteps? Or do you hear footsteps? You replenish up to 5 points of interest on the board. So one thing we didn't cover in the overview is that we're always going to have at least 3 points of interest. This would put up to 5 on there, which is a positive and a negative. It means there's more people who potentially could be harmed by the fire, but it also means there's more people for us to go save that might be closer to us. So mixed bag on that one. This is my favorite card in the whole deck. I need to save my games. This one basically says whoever owns Flashpoint gets a free action point, but you have to take one of your saved victims and remove them. So basically it would be like a simulation of my house is on fire and I'm running back into the fire to save my board games, which sounds ridiculous, but let's think about it. All of us who are hardcore board gamers have all thought, what would happen if I lost all my games in a fire? That would really suck, and I would feel really sad. So I think it's funny, but until it happens to somebody, then it's not so funny. But it's someone who's obsessed about their board games and wants to save them. So there's tons of events in that. Some are positive for the firefighters. Most are negative. Most have something that isn't great happen for them. Sometimes it's a mixed blessing, but they're all interesting and they make the game more narrative and drive things forward in the story of this fire and actually put kind of a story to it. It doesn't feel like it's an abstracted exercise. Finally, we get these extra specialists in the game. In the base game, you also get 4 new roles to play. You get the strategist, who basically gets 1 free plan AP, which means that you can give someone an AP for free on your turn. So you're basically saying, hey, when you get into there, do this thing. I'm using my wisdom to help you on that. It's a little bit like, not quite like the captain, but a little bit like that. But it gives people free actions, which is awesome. The suppression specialist is allowed to basically manipulate die for action points to keep explosions from happening or to keep fire from popping up. Very, very useful. Very useful, especially late in the game when there's tons of fire on the board. The structural engineer is another good role too. This is one that has happened in other expansions I've played with. I think this one's darn near a critical role. I think the cast firefighter, the paramedic, and the structural engineer are almost critical to have, because that element of these black cubes appearing after the place is damaged, what that it does basically is it says I can remove those cubes from the house by reinforcing walls that have been damaged and prolong the structural integrity of this building so we can keep fighting fire. The final one that you get in this is the prevention specialist. This one's more of a situational card. I don't know that this one's got such broad usage, but this one basically allows you on your turn to move smoke that you're not adjacent to, and it also allows you to move points of interest. And the points of interest in this game are the last thing I want to talk about. There are some unique points of interest in this game that are a little different than the base game, and that's pretty neat, I think. The event deck will make these come out. This is a heavy person, a person of size, I guess you could say, who instead of only taking 2 AP to move, takes 4 AP to move, because it's really difficult for them to be moved. It's really slow and really hard to get them moved. This is a couple that you find. So they are face down on the board. You flip them over, and when you flip them over, you put out 2 points of interest. You put out the male and the female, which are labeled in the set of tokens. This person here is on oxygen, which is a hazard. It could cause an explosion because oxygen is a really essential thing for fire and can make that happen. There is this person who's only lightly injured, so they are already healed when you find them. This person's very injured. Got the Star Trek shirt on, and so the very injured person can't be healed. They are unable to be healed out in the building. And so you have to deal with them being injured. Then there's this little surprise too. Oh, we got another hazard out there. So they mix things up a little bit with these tokens as well. So that's roughly what you get in the Tragic Events expansion and a very rough overview of the game. So let's get back into the studio. So that was the gameplay. A little bit of like how it works. And now I'm just going to talk a little about how I feel like this impacts the game. and how I think that it really it does help the game. I'm going to say that right now, right off the bat. But let's talk about why maybe a little bit here. So let's get right to it. Right off the bat, let's talk about. I'm gonna jumble the order here a little bit. So the hotspot mechanic in this, it removes and upgrades that. Like, so I like the idea that we're drawing cards to decide what's happening, and I think by doing that, it's not quite as random as I accidentally rolled a hotspot again. So more hotspots are gonna come. Like, there's more. Basically, based on the way how it works, I mean, like, I like to kind of talk about math in my videos. I'm not good at it, but when you roll a die, you always have like like 8 times 6, a 1 in 48 chance of rolling any combination. So when you roll that, there's a 1 in 48 chance you're going to roll any square, and 1 in 48 chance you're going to roll onto one of the hot spots. If there's 2, it's a 1 in 24 because 2 out of 48, etc. I'm not going to bore you guys with math, but like there's always the same flat rate chance of you're going to hit the hot spots. So sometimes you'll never hit a hot spot in a game. It's super easy. The game's like, oh, what was that? Other times you hit it like 5 times and it becomes this thing of like there's explosions everywhere, people are dying, and it's just grim. There's not much of a chance to win. With the adding of the fire deck, I really like how it's like you start off with you're going to hit that accelerate the fire card in there at some point. You know it's going to come up. You know that it's going to make the deck worse as it goes on, and you understand exactly how much worse it's going to be. You understand that it's inevitable that you are going to hit those hotspot cards basically, and that events are going to happen. You just hope that those events are good events, and that does happen. But I think that change of that things are going to happen. It's not a completely random die roll thing. Really makes it a more tense game. It also makes it easier to explain to people. You say, we're going to flip one of these cards over. I'll worry about putting more cards in, but here's why I'm doing it. But we flip a card over and we follow the directions. We don't have to worry about if you hit this hot spot, then understand that we need to roll again, and then we have to put another hot spot on, and it's a double roll. So, I mean, like, that's not impossible to explain, but the other thing that happens in the game, too, is you get so involved with the basic puzzle of it that you almost need a reminder that hotspots exist. Like, I've played this game a couple times over the course of my life where I've probably played it 20 times. I'll bet 2 or 3 of those times I got so involved with how chaotic things were, and there's no way we would have won in these situations probably. But like you get so involved with the chaos, the explosions, everything like that, that you forget about hotspots about halfway through the game, and you go, oh yeah, I forgot we were supposed to put those down every time we hit one of those spots. And then you try and go, did we hit those spots or didn't we? And so I think getting rid of that and just putting it into a deck where the deck does remind you of all that is a really big improvement. A really big improvement. And then let's move into the events cards. The events cards are awesome. They are just so good because they make the game different every time you play it. The game felt a little samey after a while. Maybe playing different characters helped. But I think that the events make things happen that are unpredictable, that are fun, that are narrative. And you get this sense of like, I'm there. It's like a thematic game now where you're like, I'm present at a fire and I'm trying to save people. And I really actually care about saving these people because I see them more in 3D now. I see that I'm feeling the theme more because of these narrative cards that I have there. Whereas when you're just checking die and putting chits down, I mean, the theme worked. It was fine, but it wasn't like you felt it, you know? And I mean, like, Pandemic suffers from this a little bit, that theme is fine, it works, but it's like, do you really feel like you're working as like a medic or you're solving a puzzle, you know? And in this one, in the first Flashpoint, I think it was less so from Pandemic. You felt maybe a little like you're a firefighter. That events deck makes it really feel like you're a firefighter. It makes it really feel like you're there doing stuff. So this game, I feel like the appeal of it is it's gonna be a good family weight game, co-op that you can scaffold people to playing this game for a while before they're able to make decisions on their own. I know they call it quarterbacking, but I feel like sometimes a little help early on does help in the teaching of the game, and they still feel like a sense of accomplishment, you know? So if you can figure out how to do that, that's a positive on this. I think this is going to hit the table a lot with most groups. If you're watching this video, you probably already like Flashpoint, and I think you're sensing this already. This expansion, I'm going to call it an essential expansion. I think you have to put this in there. I won't play this game without it probably now. And I think I was about done with Flashpoint. I mean, I would play it on other people's requests or with certain groups where we're introducing ideas of like co-op gaming and stuff. But I think this expansion makes the game really good again. It makes it something that it feels a little more intense, and I enjoy it. And I really like Rising 5 and I really like Black Orchestra, which are games that were built off of these foundational games like, Shadows over Camelot, Pandemic, and Flashpoint. They kind of like are the Mount Rushmore, and then we'll throw in like Lord of the Rings from Dr. Kinesia. And they're on the Mount Rushmore of co-op games. And then these other games came and like built on the top of that foundation and made something like that feels new and innovative. So like Black Orchestra is probably my favorite co-op game. This game, like when I was playing it with that event deck, I felt like, okay, this is bringing in like a part of that Black Orchestra card play a little bit into this game. And I really liked it. And I honestly would say Flashpoint went from being maybe in my top 10 favorite co-op games, certainly into my top 5. With this expansion, I feel like this expansion is to Flashpoint what Tuscany was to Viticulture. I just think that it completes the game, and I think it's something that if you're not playing with it, you aren't experiencing this game in all of its richness now. And I feel like, honest to goodness, I don't know if this is true or not. If the folks at Indie Boards and Cards, if they could do a rewind on this and get a do-over on this game, and knew that this event deck existed and knew that this deck existed, I think maybe this game would have come out with it to start with, because I just feel like it improves the game that much. So that's my opinion on it. I like this game so much better with this expansion. So how much more? So let's break this down. I put in the parentheses there what the game was before, and then now outside is with the expansion. So my ratings on this, a 2.5 would be the middle. It would be average. I think between a 2 and a 3, it really is an average thing. 3 is like, oh, I see what you did there. I like it. A 4 is like, man, this is really good, and I think that this is something that I'm going to want to play a lot. 5 is like, man, this segment of this game is perfect, and I could use it as an example of perfect gameplay. So 5s are tough to get. Let's break this down here. The accessibility of this game, most anybody can play it, especially with it being co-op and not requiring really reading. You could play this with like kind of small children. They could roll the die and you could help them find the spots on the coordinates. You could help them with their decisions. You could scaffold them up with a co-op game. You can use scaffolding. I know we kind of criticize that, saying it's QBing, but you can scaffold to help players that need it. And I think if people are asking for it, helping them is great. So I think that most everybody could play this. The theme, I mean, like, they abstracted the theme enough in this that I don't feel like it's going to be objectionable to people. I know one of the expansions had, like, realistic-looking potential victim tokens, and this has gone away from that, and they aren't using those, and I'm kind of glad. I mean, I like the abstracted a little bit tokens. There's no gore in this. There's no, like, talk about, third-degree burns in the treatment center and stuff like that, but there's an intensity to it, so maybe not quite all, but for the sake of my ratings here, I'm going to say close enough to all that I'm giving it an all rating. The fun on this, the fun's gone up quite a bit because of that event deck again. The event deck really has helped the fun in this game. So it's a 4 out of 5 now instead of a 3 out of 5. I think it's much better. The replayability has been helped a ton with this. I think the fact that the event deck makes the games different every time you play them, and I think the fact that the deck kind of got rid of the hotspots, the fire deck got rid of the hotspots. It's not just die rolling. It's not a completely random, like, are we going to really be slaughtered this time by bad luck, or is it going to be good luck and we'll have an easy time of it? I think the deck really just helps mitigate that a little bit. So the replayability, I really want to play this a lot more now with this event deck kind of thing and the fire deck kind of thing going on. As far as the characters they include, they're fine. I think they're a good addition, but they don't make this expansion. Those other two decks really do make this expansion. The design and the art, a 4 out of 5. It's perfectly functional, and I really do kind of like the overheads of the, like, apartments and the houses. Like, it's kind of neat. It's like, I don't know, it reminds me of like a video game, like a Sims video game or something, where you're looking into the house. And I do like it. It feels like a house, So I like that. I like some of the decisions they made with the abstracted kind of victims. The art on the firefighter cards is really, really good. So 4 out of 5, overall pretty good art and design. I think that there are some over the top things in the Kickstarter editions of this game that probably would deserve more than a 4 out of 5 on the art and the design. But I think that the art and design in the base game that I reviewed here is a 4 out of 5. It's really good. I mean, 4s again are really good. So very good. So where do I put this at? Well, I give it an overall rating of 4 out of 5. I actually, like, it's a strong 4 out of 5. Very good 4 out of 5. And a 4 out of 5 means I think that 80% of board gamers, between 70 and 80% of board gamers, would really benefit from having this game in their life, in their game group somewhere. Accessibility to it, whether you own it or you get a chance to play it, you should play it. So that's well over half of people out there, I think. And I will say this. I put at the bottom here, let's move out of the way, essential expansion. I 100% think this. If you own Flashpoint, I 100% think that you should go out and you should own this expansion. 100%. I don't think I would want to play this. Now that I've experienced an expansion, I don't want to play this game without it. And I won't play it without it. I think it's 100% a must-have expansion, and that doesn't happen often. I'm thinking Viticulture with Tuscany is one of them. Champions of Midgard with Valhalla is one of them. This one's one of them. And it really is, I think, a critical and a totally essential expansion for this game. And I think that you should do yourself a favor and play with it. So that's it. If you like Flashpoint, honestly, get this expansion. I mean, I don't know what else to say. So thanks for watching. I've been Joel, and keep gaming.